Today, we're going to talk about the reproductive process, conception, the making and developing and pushing out of babies. Okay, let's get into it. So, conception. Conception is a successful fertilization. So, conception or fertilization occurs when a sperm and egg unite. This forms, and don't get bogged down in all these words. There's like a million different things that we call babies before we call them babies. And I'm not super concerned about you remembering the exact difference between, at day 3, it's this versus day 7, it's that. But it forms a zygote, which is what we call a fertilized egg. And again, remember that fertilization happens in the fallopian tube because it needs to have enough time to double and triple and quadruple and develop and get bigger before it makes its way into the uterus to actually be able to attach in the uterus. At this point, the female is pregnant. So millions, remember, quality versus quantity for men versus women, millions of sperm are ejaculated into the vagina. Most of them are going to die. Remember that the vagina is an inhospitable host environment. And so most of them die from the acidity, either from coming out of the urethra or more than likely from the pH in the vagina. The temperature of the vagina, remember that the reason that sperm have to be made in testicles that hang external to the body is because they die in warm temperatures. Not all of them are great swimmers. There's going to be a lot of death. This is a real microscopic picture of sperm, and this is the egg that it's trying to burrow into. So sperm will make their way, so they're deposited into the vagina. They swim through the hole in the cervix all the way up through the uterus and then divide and go into the fallopian tubes. And if there is an ovulated egg in that fallopian tube, it will stay there for a day or so as it's kind of trying to make its way through the tube. And those few days are your best chance. Don't get me wrong, it's not your only chance, but it is your best chance for fertilization to get pregnant. When the sperm reaches the egg, there's a little enzyme in the head of the sperm that helps it burrow or kind of eat its way into the egg. Once one makes it all the way in, so this sperm right here, that's the head or the nucleus of the sperm. This is the tail that's left outside. So once the sperm penetrates the wall of the egg will put up a defense so that no other sperm can penetrate it, so that it only gets fertilized the once, so that it has the correct number of genetic material. So once sperm once DNA from the sperm and once DNA from the egg fuse, that's it. Your baby is decided. How tall that kid's going to be, the hair color, whether or not they're going to need braces, all that stuff is decided in that 1 second, which is just incredible for me to think about. A lot of people at this point ask about twins. So if you have identical twins, then there was one sperm and one egg, and then that one sperm and one egg split and turned into 2 kids. If you have non-identical twins, then the mom ovulated 2 different eggs, and both of those eggs got fertilized by 2 different sperm. All right, so pregnancy. Again, you are pregnant after the fertilization has occurred, and it lasts in the gestational, which means baby cooking time, in a human is 40 weeks, and this is different for every species. I will say that this gets really confusing because here's how we count those 40 weeks. We say day 1 of pregnancy is the first day of your last period. So obviously, if a lady is pregnant this month, she wasn't pregnant this month because she had her period. We're still going to say day 1 of your period is day 1 of pregnancy. So remember that it takes a couple weeks for you to go through that menstrual phase and then the follicular phase before you hit ovulation. And then ovulation on day 14 of your cycle is really where you probably got pregnant. But people don't usually tend to know when they ovulated, but they can tell you the date that they started their last period. So even though we start from the day of your last period, technically in this counting, it's about week 2 is actually the week that you got pregnant. So this starts to get really confusing when you're talking about well, how far along is she, but how far along is the baby and which way are we counting? So don't get too caught up in it. But sometimes you'll hear someone say, that they're a month pregnant or whatever, and they're actually 2 weeks pregnant because the first 2 weeks was their period and the follicular stage. We're going to keep it super simple. Again, it goes through a few different names before it even gets to this point. An embryo doesn't actually start until a little bit over this, but we're going to call it an embryo or a fetus, and then a newborn once it's born. And again, there's no test question on, it's week 9. What's the name of it? I don't care about that, but just so that you've heard some of the major terms. I put links to these in your in that reproductive video document that's with all the lectures that comes out each week. This is 6 to 8 weeks, 12 to 14. You can start to see the amniotic sac and the placenta here. 17 to 19, 5 to 6. These slides are really cool. It goes like kind of month-ish by month, like all the different big things that happen, and shows ultrasound and pictures of the baby at that point. This fetal development video is a TED Talk that's going to seem like it's not real, but it's real. It's a video of a guy who wrote software that let scan a developing fetus in utero. You get to really see the baby grow, and it is just incredible. I can't believe that software is out there. All right, so you had an egg fertilized, that's conception. You were pregnant, you carried the baby through 40 weeks, and now it's time to push. So labor, the pushing out of the baby happens in 3 different stages. So the first stage that you have is the dilation stage. And when we talk about dilation, we mean the cervix. So remember, this bottom inch or so of the uterus was the cervix. So this whole thing would be uterus, and this is the vaginal canal. This is the cervix part. And that little hole right there is what has to dilate for the baby's head to come out. So from onset of labor until you are fully dilated, we call that the dilation stage. And when I say fully dilated, I mean 10 centimeters. And there's 2.5 inches, and centimeters in an inch. So I think this is about 4 inches. So baby's going to come out of a 4-inch hole. I know it's not. I don't. Physics. Why? How? Why can't we just grow them in a garden? I'm not sure. So the uterus, remember, is a muscle. It's a very, very, very strong, smooth muscle. Oxytocin starts to set it off. And actually, this is why. So the baby, the very end of pregnancy, will put itself in this orientation, butt up, head down. And then the head will start to hit on the cervix, and the cervix will signal to release oxytocin, which will make this squeeze. And so uterus contractions, real uterus contractions, squeeze from the top. And so they squeeze down, and the baby's head hitting the cervix is what actually signals the cervix to open up. So contractions move the fetus down to the uterus and cause the cervix to dilate, meaning to open up. We already talked about that it is oxytocin that does this. So let me see. Yeah. I want to go over one thing. There are 2 different things that we talk about when we talk about how this phase. We say, she's 2 centimeters dilated, 4 centimeters dilated, 8 centimeters dilated, but they also put a percentage. She's 2 centimeters and 40%. So that 40% is called effacement, and effacement means the thinning out. So I know that you can see this hole is still not really all that much bigger, tiny bit bigger, much bigger. The changes early on in labor are the thinning out of this, the thickness of the cervix here. So look how thick that is. And then here it's saying it's 30% smaller. So now it's small. Now it's tiny, right? And so after it thins out is when it really starts to dilate. And I linked a video that's going to show that in just a second, but this is disturbing. So you walking around dilated about a Cheerio. By the time labor is over, you dilated a bagel. Not the inside hole of a bagel, people. The bagel. Baby coming out of a bagel. Wow. All right. And this video right here is a cool activity that you can do with, if you have a ping pong ball and a balloon, that really shows you labor. It also kind of helps explain the effacement thing, how like the uterus like spreads out, the cervix like pulls up, and that's what thins out that cervix. If you don't have a ping pong ball and a balloon, I still suggest that you watch this, because it's super cool and it makes me nervous to watch. Again, that link is on the reproductive videos document and in this week's links. So you're fully dilated, you're 100% effaced, it's time to push. Expulsion stage is the pushing out stage. So it starts at the point that you're fully dilated, and it ends at the point when the baby is in the outside world. So there's two different ways to go about it. You can have a natural delivery. A lot of times when people say natural nowadays, we mean that you didn't use medications, you didn't use drugs for some reason. So a lot of times we more clearly say that it's a vaginal delivery. Or you can have a C-section. C-section, the C stands for cesarean. There's a few different reasons why we would have to have C-sections. One is that the baby isn't presenting right. So again, it should be butt up, head down. Sometimes if they're breech, meaning that their feet are down here and their head is up here, that's harder to deliver. Some doctors will still try to deliver a breech delivery if they're pretty confident about the size of the baby and everything else is going to be okay. But some won't. Also, just if the baby is large and the lady's pelvis openings aren't going to allow for it. And if you've ever had a C-section in the past, a lot of times they want you to keep with that because sometimes the muscle, the scar from the C-section, you won't have, you can't push or the scar could tear back open, which is something out of a horror film. Episiotomy. Don't know if I talked to you about the episiotomy. Episiotomy is, let me put a picture in here to show you, which is nice. If you remember the picture of the vulva, which is all the outside structures, from the bottom of the vaginal opening to the anus, that area of skin was called the perineum. The perineum frequently tears during vaginal birth in different stages. Like stage 1 tear would be just a tiny tear. Stage 4 tear is like you tore from hole to hole. Episiotomy is where a doctor will go in and make a tiny cut in that so that it will tear evenly instead of tearing jaggedly. Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's just science. So episiotomies are kind of like some doctors love them and some doctors hate them. Here's why. So if I'm trying to rip my shirt, I'm gonna have a really hard time, right? But if you put if you cut a little cut into my shirt and I try to rip it, it's obviously gonna rip much, much easier. So when we do episiotomies, the downside is that they're probably gonna tear more because you've put a little cut in that and now it's going to rip much easier. However, the upside is that it's going to tear evenly so we can stitch it back up and it will heal nice. If we don't put an episiotomy, it might not tear at all, or it might still tear, but not as bad, but it's probably going to rip jaggedly and then we're not going to be able to sew it up nice and neat. Those stitches are dissolvable. And anyways, moving on. Okay, so we had dilation. And then we had expulsion, which is where we expelled you out of the uterus. We pushed you out. And now you had the placental stage. A lot of times this is called the afterbirth. It's the last stage of labor. This is when the placenta that was nourishing the baby comes out, delivered due to the final uterine contractions. It can be delivered up to half an hour after birth. A lot of times women don't even realize that this is a thing that's happening because the baby already came out and it was very big. And this is not... and they're like holding the baby and things like that at this point. I did want to go back and show you how babies come out. So they almost always come out this way. So this is the top of mom's belly and this is her spine. So she's looking up. So baby comes head down and then they rotate it. They have to kind of get the shoulders out one by one because heads are bad, shoulders are bigger. But if you can angle them so that you get one shoulder out and then the other shoulder. And once you've got that head and those shoulders out, the rest of the body just falls right out. And you will see that this is a placenta. When we take placentas out, we have to save them for the doctor to see, not like for a long time, just like real quick for the doctor to look at, because the doctor and people who are trained in this can look and make sure that it's intact. If you leave pieces of the placenta behind in the uterus can't contract back down and stop bleeding. So a lot of issues where women died giving birth and things like that way back in the day was because placenta was left in them and we didn't realize it and then they bled to death. Watch these at your own peril. I am telling you, they are no holds barred childbirth videos. And I think the last one is maybe a placenta being delivered. Again, I have linked these in the videos link document and on that first thing every week. All right, just a couple more slides before we stop for today. So ectopic pregnancy, we may have talked about before. An ectopic pregnancy is any time that a baby implants somewhere other than the uterus. So babies are supposed to get fertilized here and keep traveling and implant and grow here. They're supposed to be fertilized in the fallopian tube, continue to travel, actually implant and grow in the uterus. Sometimes PID can do it. There's lots of different reasons that women will get ectopic pregnancies, but baby gets fertilized here and can't get out, and so they implant here. So fertilized egg implant somewhere other than the uterus, and it is almost always in that fallopian tube. So here's what you're looking down at: a uterus, and then this is the fallopian tube, and this is a pregnancy trying to grow in the fallopian tube. This is not compatible with life. Baby cannot survive. And in fact, if you do not go in and end the pregnancy, terminate the pregnancy, the fallopian tube will pop eventually, and then mom will bleed to death as well. We have to terminate this pregnancy, or mom dies too. So anything that has caused infection in the uterus or the fallopian tube, is like pelvic inflammatory disease. That's the one that the women get when they get STDs and don't get them treated. Some women just have structural problems in their fallopian tubes. Their fallopian tubes are just windy or kinky or weird, and things get caught in them. Here's the sad part about ectopic pregnancies, if you can't already figure out that they're sad, especially sad because they start out normally. Women don't know that it's an ectopic pregnancy. They go through all the same normal. They've missed a period. They get breast tenderness. They start getting morning sickness. They take a test. They test positive. Everything looks like it's going to be a normal pregnancy. Mom and dad are super excited. And then at some point, they start having some pain, some issues, some spottings, and they'll go in and get ultrasounds and tests done, and they'll find it in the fallopian tube. And then we have to terminate the pregnancy. Again, the abdominal or pelvic pain starts, light bleeding starts, and then they go in. So the way that we're going to stop it, if we find it quickly enough, we're going to go in and do an injection that dissolves the baby, basically. If it's found later on and it's past the point where we can do this, then they'll have to go in and surgically remove it. All right, last slide for today. We're going to talk about something called baby blues versus postpartum depression. So maybe you've heard of something called the baby blues. This woman just created this human, and now this human won't stop crying. And this woman is experiencing a fire sale of hormones. It's a rough time. So new mothers often have like mood swings. They're anxious, they're scared, they're tired, they're sad, they're weepy. And that's normal. Baby blues are normal as long as it passes quickly. It's gone within a few days or, a week or two tops. And again, a lot of it is the hormones. Hormones made this. And so now that this is out, all them hormones are like, well, what do we do now? Crap. So hormones are freaking out in new moms, and they're sleep deprived and caring for a human. So normal. Postpartum depression is not. Postpartum depression is more severe, and the symptoms don't go away as quickly. Especially if at any point you are worried about harming yourself or harming the baby. That's not normal. That's postpartum depression, and you need to go see a healthcare professional. Please seek help if. So again, if it's 2 weeks, if this baby is 2 weeks old and you are still not coping with life well, go talk to someone. If it interferes with your ability to take care of yourself or to take care of the baby. Now, I don't mean like you didn't get to shower today because you were so busy, but like if this kid's screaming and they've been screaming for 2 hours and you can't get up off this chair, that's a problem. So you're not taking care of your kid. If you stop eating, if you're not taking care of your kid or taking care of yourself, please, please, please go see someone. And dear Lord, if you have thoughts of harming yourself or your baby. So you hear tragic stories about moms killing babies, drowning babies, things like that. That's generally a postpartum depression thing. It does not mean you're a weak person. It means something chemically has gone wrong with you. So please, please, please go seek help. I think, that's going to be it for today, guys. So we'll pick back up and do our last set of notes tomorrow.